My name is Dr. Darby Campbell, and I want to share with you one of the most important lessons I've ever learned in my life. It has helped me become more steady, more balanced, more kind of standing on solid ground rather than getting swayed back and forth with the tides of life. And when we're going through very stressful events in our life, this is more important than ever. And so what we're going to be talking about is a state of balance. And so what tends to happen with our perception of events is there can be things that make us very happy. There can be things that make us very sad. Both these things are going to be happening in our lives all the time, but in all situations, there's typically always a state of balance. And we can see this through practice hindsight, but when we start to get to the point where we are seeing this in the present, we become much more stable, even through the most trying situations of our lives. And so I'm going to draw a diagram here to help explain. And so there is many ups and downs in life. And there is both positive and negative aspects to them. If you're familiar with a magnet, you can never get just one side of a magnet. You can never get just the positive. You can never have a day without night. There's always a balance in the world. If we cut that magnet in half, we should just have one positive, but that's not what we see. We actually see the magnet just changes and there's a positive and a negative. And so what tends to happen in life is when we become emotional or polarized, we tend to just see one side of the coin, whether that is a positive aspect of the coin or the negative aspect of the coin. And so if we go through a circumstance and it happens to be, well, let's just tell a story. Let's go back to the story of a wise old farmer. So the farmer has a son, and the son's out there and he's kind of managing his livestock. He's riding his horse. He's out there checking the acreage, if you will. And his horse steps in a pothole and breaks its leg. And then unfortunately, you have to put the horse down. The neighbor comes over and it says, "Hey Doc, your horse died. That was your workhorse. That's how you plowed the field. That's how you got into the market to take your resources. This is so damaging to your future economics, to your future health, to your future life." And he's just like, "Yeah, it is what it is. We'll figure it out." And so that same farmer, his son now has more time because he's not really doing a lot right now. They don't have the workhorse. So he's out just kind of walking around, and all of a sudden in the distance, he spots a new mare and a young colt. And the son is pretty talented, and he's able to actually capture them and wrangle them in and kind of pen them with like a natural kind of canyon formation. He chased them back in there, and he's able to bring these two wild horses back to his farm. And in turn, the son also turns out to be pretty gifted with horses, because he quickly finds that they can kind of break that mare, and that mare becomes a very productive member of their farm. And then so the neighbor comes back over and he's just like, "Oh my gosh, you lost one, but now you got two. And that mare, she's better than your old horse was. And she has a young stallion that's gonna help you not only produce more horses in the future, but it's very strong and vibrant. It's probably gonna produce strong offspring, but it's gonna be very strong for itself." And so the neighbors or the doc's like, "Yeah, that's true. That's pretty cool. Staying pretty steady." Because then there's another side of this story. Well, the son's trying to break that young stallion, and he ends up falling and breaking his arm and getting a permanent disability in his arm. And so the neighbor comes over and says, "What are you going to do? What are you going to do? That new stallion just got this, it broke your son's arm. He's going to be permanently disabled now. He's not going to be able to produce for your farm anymore. You're going to have to go back and work the land to a much greater degree because you're going to have less help. What are you going to do? What are you going to do?" The neighbor's like, "Yeah, we'll figure it out." World War I starts. And because his son was injured the way he was, he actually wasn't drafted and he wasn't sent off to the war. And so even though his son was disabled, he could still do some work on the farm, not to near the extent of what he did before, but because of that disability, he wasn't drafted. And if you know anything about history, World War I did not have a great survivability. There was a lot of fatalities. And so all of a sudden, because of that disability, now his son gets to stay with him. Pretty cool. And so there's always these balances to the story. So the farmer was operating in a state in the middle, knowing that everything just is. There's always going to be positive and negatives. And if we are very polarized by one side, whether we are euphoric, our business is going through the roof, our son is just, he is a rock star athlete, our daughter is a great academic, she's getting all these scholarships, all this stuff, but everything has a negative side too. It's like, oh, because the daughter is great academic, she's now moving farther away because she's going to a far school, and so there's some downsides to it. There's always going to be a positive and negative. And so when we only see one side, say it's over here, we tend to get euphoric, and then we tend to take more risks, and we tend to attract into our life challenge, because our body is actually trying to get us to a neutral state, because when we are over here, we're actually not operating in a very ideal state of health. Same thing over here, when we get only focused on the one side of the coin, we tend to get depressed. And then naturally what we attract into our life is support. People will come into our lives and they'll try to support us, encourage us, to try to bring us back to the middle, to where we should be. Because our body is trying to get us to operate in a state of balance, because this is where health is. But then also, kind of the whole universe is going to try to bring balance to things. And so there's always going to be a positive and negative. And so when we're going through situations that we're maybe going through right now, and we're very negative about the outlook, we're very negative about the outlook of our future economy, our future health, the state of our country, we have to in turn see the positives of that circumstance. Because when we balance out all the negatives with the positives, we are going to operate in a much more state of balance and a higher level of thinking, and we'll have just a much greater outlook on life, and we'll have a much greater health, and we'll have a much greater ability to respond appropriately and lead others and lead our families, and to bring everyone together so that we actually get stronger through these events. And so that is how we can bring balance to the system, and I look forward to serving you to help bring balance to your health.